Tupelo. We went into summer quarters at Tupelo. Our principal occupation at this place was playing poker, chuck-a-luck, and cracking graybacks. Lice. Every soldier had a brigade of lice on him, and I have seen fellows so busily engaged in cracking them that it reminded me of an old woman knitting. At first, the boys would go off into the woods and hide to louse themselves, but that was unnecessary. The ground fairly crawled with lice. Pharaoh's people, when they were resisting old Moses, never suffered the plague of lice more than we did. The boys would frequently have a louse race. There was one fellow who kept winning all the money. His lice would run quicker and crawl faster than anyone else's. We couldn't figure it out. If some fellow happened to catch a fierce-looking louse, he would call on Dornan for a race. Dornan would come and always win the stake. The lice were placed on plates. This was the race course, and the first one that crawled off was the winner. At last we discovered Dornan's trick. He always heated his plate. Billy P. said he had no lice on him. Did you ever look? No. How do you know then? If ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise, said Billy. Why, there's one crawling on your chest now. Billy took him and put him back in his shirt and said to the louse, You stay there now. This makes the 4th time I've put you back, and if I catch you out again today, I'll martyr you. Billy was philosophical. The death of one louse didn't stop the breed. The court-martial at Tupelo. At this place was held the grand court-martial. Almost every day we would hear a discharge of musketry, and knew that some poor, trembling wretch had bid farewell to mortal things here below. It seemed to be only a question of time for all of us as to when we, too, would be shot. We were afraid to even chirp. As far as patriotism was concerned, we had forgotten all about that. We no longer loved our country. We feared to brag. Men were being led to the death stake every day. I heard of many being shot, but I saw only 2 men executed myself. I don't know what regiment they belonged to, but I remember they were mere beardless boys. I didn't learn what their crime was, or the severity of their offense. They might have deserved death for all I know. I saw an old man, about 60 years old, named Dave Brewer, and another man, about 45, named Rube Franklin, whipped. Many men were whipped and branded that I never saw or heard of. But I remember these 2 because they belonged to Company A of the 23rd Tennessee Regiment, and I knew many men in that regiment. These 2 men were hung up by their hands after having their heads shaved to a tree prepared for the purpose. The prongs had been left on the tree, and one hand was stretched toward one prong, and the other to another prong. Their feet perhaps just touched the ground. The man doing the whipping had a thick piece of sole leather, the end of which was cut into 3 strips. These were tacked onto the end of a paddle. After the charges and specifications were read, both men being stark naked, the whipper lit in on Rube, who was the younger. I don't think he meant to hit as hard as he did, but being excited himself, he blistered Rube from head to foot. 39 lashes was always the number. Now 3 times 39 makes 117. When he struck, 1 lash would leave 3 welts. When he finished with Rube, the captain, commanding the squad, told him to go easier on Old Man Brewer, that he was so old he might die from it. He gave Old Man Dave Brewer 39 lashes, but they were laid on light. Old Dave didn't beg or scream like Rube did. He just stood there and took it, like the old preacher who caught the bear on a Sunday. They brought him up before the church and agreed to let him off if he didn't set his trap again. Well, he said, Brethren, I jest did set it. Raiding on roasting gears. At this place, General Bragg issued an order authorizing citizens to defend themselves against the depredations of soldiers, to shoot them down if caught stealing. Well, one day, Byron Richardson and I made a raid on an old citizen's roasting ear patch. We had pulled about all the corn we could carry. I had my arms full and was about to start for camp when an old citizen raised up and said, "Stop there, drop that corn." He had a double-barreled shotgun cocked and leveled at my chest. "Come and go with me to General Bragg's headquarters. I intend to take you there. By the living God." I was in for it. Directed to walk in front, I was being marched to Bragg's headquarters. I could see the devil in the old man's eyes. I tried to talk him out of it with promises, but he was deaf to all pleading. I told him about our hardships and suffering, but the old man was unmoved. We were steadily marching toward Bragg's headquarters. I was determined not to see General Bragg, even if the old man shot me in the back. All at once, a happy thought struck me. Said I, "Mr. Byron Richardson is still in your field, and if you go back now, we can catch him, and you can take both of us to General Bragg." The old man's courage was up. He had captured me so easily, he probably thought he could take a dozen more. We turned back a short distance, and there was Byron, who had just climbed over the fence with his arms full of corn. The old citizen, now diverted from me, leveled his double barrel at Byron. At that moment I grabbed his gun. It went off into the air, and with Byron's help, we took both him and his gun. The tables were turned. We made the old man gather as much corn as he could carry, and made him haul it nearly all the way to camp. Then we let him go, a wiser, if not a better or richer man. We took his gun and bent it around a blackjack tree. He was left at the mercy of the soldiers. We go into Kentucky. After being thoroughly reorganized at Tupelo and after the troops had recovered their health and spirits, we made an advance into Kentucky. We took the cars at Tupelo and went to Mobile, from there across Mobile Bay to Montgomery, Alabama, then to Atlanta, from there to Chattanooga, and then over the mountains on foot to the bluegrass regions of Kentucky, the dark and bloody ground. Please remember, patient reader, that I write entirely from memory. I have no data or diary or anything to go by, and memory is a peculiar faculty. I find that I cannot remember towns and battles. I only remember the little things. I remember how gladly the citizens of Kentucky received us. I thought they had the prettiest girls that God ever made. They could not do too much for us. They had heaps and stacks of cooked rations along our route, with wine and cider everywhere, and the glad shouts of "Hurrah for our Southern boys!" greeted and welcomed us at every house. Ah, the boys felt like soldiers again. The bands played merrier and livelier tunes. It was like a patient convalescing. The fever had left him. He was getting fat and strong. The old fire illuminated his eyes. His step was buoyant and proud. He felt ashamed that he had ever been hacked. He could fight now. It was the same proud soldier of yore. The bands played Dixie and the Bonnie Blue Flag. The citizens cheered, and the ladies waved their handkerchiefs and threw us bouquets. Ah, those were halcyon days, and your old soldier, kind reader, loves to recall that happy period. Mumfordsville had been captured with 5,000 prisoners. New recruits were continually joining our ranks. Camp Dick Robinson, that immense pile of army stores, had fallen into our hands. We rode upon the summit of the wave of success. The boys had gotten clean clothes and had their faces washed. I saw then what I had long since forgotten, a cockade. The Kentucky girls made cockades for us, and almost every soldier had one pinned on his hat. But stirring events were hastening on. The black cloud of battle and war had begun to appear much larger than a man's hand. In fact, we could see the lightning flash and hear the thunder roar. We were at Harrodsburg. The Yankees were approaching Perryville under General Buell. The Yankees had been dogging our rear, picking up our stragglers and capturing some of our wagon trains. This good time that we were having was too good to last. We were in an ecstasy akin to heaven. We were happy, the troops were jubilant, our manhood blood pulsated more warmly, our patriotism was awakened, our pride was renewed and ready for any emergency. We felt that one Southern man could whip 20 Yankees. All was lovely, and the goose hung high. We went to dances and parties every night. When General Chalmers marched to Perryville, in flanking and surrounding Mumfordsville, we marched the whole night long. We, the private soldiers, did not know what was going on among the generals. All we had to do was march, march, march. It didn't matter how tired, hungry, or thirsty we were. Every staff officer who would pass, some fellow would say, "Hey, mister, how far is it to Mumfordsville?" He would answer, 5 miles. It seemed to me we traveled 100 miles and were always within 5 miles of Mumfordsville. That night we heard a volley of musketry in our immediate front and didn't know what it meant. Soon we came to where a few soldiers had lighted some candles and were holding them over the body of a dead soldier. It was Captain Allison, if I remember rightly, of General Cheatham's staff. He was very bloody and had his clothes riddled with bullets. I heard that he rode on in front of the advance guard of our army and had no doubt discovered the Yankee picket and came galloping back at full speed in the dark when our advance guard fired on and killed him. We laid down in a graveyard that night and slept, and when we awoke, the sun was high in the heavens, shining in our faces. Mumfordsville had surrendered. The next day, Dr. C.T. Quintard let me ride his horse nearly all day, while he walked with the Webfeet. The Battle of Perryville. In giving a description of this most memorable battle, I do not pretend to give you figures, or describe how this general looked, or how that one spoke, or how the other charged with drawn saber, etc. I know nothing of these things. See the histories for that. I was simply a soldier of the line, and I only write of the things I saw. I was in every battle, skirmish, and march made by the First Tennessee Regiment during the war, and I do not remember a harder contest or a more evenly fought battle than that of Perryville. If it had been 2 men wrestling, it would have been called a dogfall. Both sides claimed the victory. Both whipped. I stood picket in Perryville the night before the battle, a Yankee on one side of the street and I on the other. We got very friendly during the night and made a raid upon a citizen's pantry where we captured a bucket of honey, a pitcher of sweet milk, and 3 or 4 biscuits. The old citizen was not at home. He and his whole household had gone visiting, I believe. In fact, I think all the citizens of Perryville were taken with a sudden notion of visiting about this time. At least, they were not home to all callers. At length the morning dawned. Our line was drawn up on one side of Perryville, the Yankee army on the other. The 2 enemies, soon to meet in deadly embrace, seemed to be eyeing each other. The blue coats lined the hillside in plain view. You could count the number of their regiments by the number of their flags. We could see the huge war dogs frowning at us, ready at any moment to belch forth their fire and smoke, and hurl their thunderbolts of iron and death into our very midst. I wondered why the fighting didn't begin. Never on earth were our troops more eager for the engagement to open, The Yankees began marching to their left, and we marched almost parallel to our right, both sides watching each other's maneuvers and movements. It was just the lull before the storm. Colonel Field was commanding our brigade, and Lieutenant Colonel Patterson our regiment. About noon, while we were marching through a cornfield in which the corn had been shocked, they opened their war dogs upon us. The beginning of the end had come. Here is where Captain John F. Wallace was wounded, and 3 others whose names I have forgotten. The battle now opened in earnest, and from one end of the line to the other, it seemed to be a solid sheet of blazing smoke and fire. Our regiment crossed a stream, preceded by Wharton's Texas Rangers, and we were ordered to attack at once, with vigor. Here General Maney's horse was shot. From this moment the battle became a mortal struggle. 2 lines of battle confronted us. We killed almost everyone in the first line and were soon charging over the second, when, right in our immediate front, was their third and main line of battle, from which 4 Napoleon guns poured their deadly fire. We did not recoil, but our line was hurled back by the leaden hail that was poured into our very faces. 8 color-bearers were killed at one discharge of their cannon. We were right up among the very wheels of their Napoleon guns. It was death to retreat in any direction. Our Lieutenant Colonel Patterson yelled to charge and take the guns, and we were soon in a hand-to-hand fight, every man for himself, using the butts of our guns and bayonets. One side would waver and fall back a few yards, then rally, while the other would fall back, leaving the 4 Napoleon guns behind. And still the battle raged. Such obstinate fighting I never saw before or since. The guns were fired so rapidly it seemed the earth itself was in volcanic uproar. The iron storm tore through our ranks, mangling and shredding men to pieces. The very air seemed full of smoke and fire. It was the very pit of hell, peopled by contending demons. Our men were dead and dying right in the very midst of this grand havoc of battle. It was life against life, and death against death. A brutal struggle. The sun was poised above us, a great red ball sinking slowly in the west, yet the scene of battle and carnage continued. I cannot describe it. The mantle of night fell upon the scene. I do not know which side won, but I know that I helped bring off those 4 Napoleon guns that night, though we were mighty easy about it. They were given to Turner's battery of our brigade, and had the name of our Lieutenant Colonel Patterson and our color-bearer Mitchell, both of whom were killed, inscribed on 2 of the pieces. I have forgotten the names inscribed on the other 2. I saw those very 4 guns surrendered at Missionary Ridge, but that is a story for another time. The Battle of Perryville presented a strange scene. The dead, dying, and wounded of both armies, Confederate and Federal, were blended in inextricable confusion. Now and then a cluster of dead Yankees, and close by a cluster of dead rebels. It was like the Englishman's grog, half and half. Now, if you wish, kind reader, to find out how many were killed and wounded, I refer you to the histories. I remember one little incident that made me laugh right in the midst of battle. We were charging through an old citizen's yard when a big yellow cur dog ran out and started snapping at the soldiers' legs while they kicked at him to keep him off. The next morning he was lying near the same place, but he was a dead dog. I helped bring off our wounded that night. We worked the whole night through. The next morning, about daylight, a wounded comrade, Sam Campbell, complained of being cold and asked me to lie down beside him. I did so and was soon asleep. When I awoke, the poor fellow was stiff and cold in death. His spirit had flown to its home beyond the skies. After the battle was over, John T. Tucker, Scott Stevens, A.S. Horsley, and I were detailed to bring off our wounded that night, and we helped to carry off many a poor, dying comrade. Joe Thompson, Billy Bond, Byron Richardson, the two Allen boys, brothers, killed side by side, and Colonel Patterson, who was killed standing right by my side. He was first shot through the hand, and while wrapping his handkerchief around it, another ball struck and killed him. I saw W. J. Wittern, then a stripling boy of 15 years old, fall, shot through the neck and collarbone. He fell, apparently dead. Then, all at once, I saw him jump up, grab his gun, and start loading and firing, and I heard him say, "Damn them, I'll fight them as long as I live." Witt thought he was dead, but he's living yet. We helped bring off a man by the name of Hodge, with his lower jaw shot off and his tongue lolling out. We brought off Captain Lute B. Irvine. Lute was shot through the lungs and was vomiting blood the whole time, begging us to lay him down and let him die. But Lute is still living. Also, Lieutenant Woldridge, with both eyes shot out. I found him rambling in a briar patch. About 50 members of the Rock City Guards were killed and nearly 100 wounded. They were led by Captains W. D. Kelly, Wheelis, and Steele. Lieutenant Thomas H. Maney was badly wounded. I saw, dead on the battlefield, a Federal general by the name of Jackson. It was his brigade that fought us so obstinately at this place, and I did hear that they were raised in Kentucky. Colonel Field, then commanding our brigade, and riding his fine gray mare, rode up almost face to face with General Jackson before he was killed. Colonel Field was firing the whole time with his 7-shooting rifle. I cannot tell half or even remember at this late date the scenes of blood and suffering that I witnessed on the battlefield of Perryville, but its history, like all the rest, has gone into the record of the war. It has been 20 years ago, and I write entirely from memory. I remember Lieutenant Joe P. Lee and Captain W. C. Flournoy standing right at the muzzle of the Napoleon guns, and the next moment they seemed to be enveloped in smoke and fire from the discharge of the cannon. When the regiment recoiled under the heavy firing at the first charge, Billy Webster and I stopped behind a large oak tree and continued firing at the Yankees until the regiment was again charging upon the 4 Napoleon guns heavily supported by infantry. We were not more than 20 paces from them. There I was shot through the hat and the cartridge box. I remember this clearly because at that moment Billy and I were ahead of our line, and whenever we saw a Yankee rise to shoot, we shot him. And I want to say right here that a braver or more noble boy was never created on earth than Billy Webster. Everybody liked him. He was the flower and chivalry of our regiment. His record as a brave and noble boy will forever live in the hearts of his old comrades who served with him in Company H. He is up yonder now, and we shall meet again. In these memoirs, I only tell what I saw myself, and in this way the world will know the truth. Now, citizen, let me tell you something you have never heard before, and it is this. There were many men with the rank and pay of general who were not truly generals, and there were many men with the rank and pay of private who would have honored and adorned the name of general. Now I will go even further and say that a private soldier was a private. It did not matter how ignorant a corporal might be, he was always right. It did not matter how intelligent the private might be, and so on up. The sergeant was right over the corporal, the sergeant major over the sergeant, the lieutenant over him, and the captain over him, and the major over him, and the colonel over him, and the general over him, and so on, up to President Jefferson Davis. You see, a private had no right to know anything, and that is why generals did all the fighting. That is why today generals and colonels and captains are great men. They fought the battles of our country. The privates did not. The generals risked their reputations. The private soldier his life. No one ever saw a private in battle. His history would never be written. It was the generals that everybody saw charge such and such, with drawn saber, his eyes flashing fire, his nostrils dilated, and his clarion voice ringing above the din of battle. In a horn, over the left, Bill Johns and Marsh Pinkard would have made generals who would have distinguished themselves and been an honor to the country. I know today many a private who would have made a good general. I know of many a general who was better suited to be excused from detail and fights, to hang around, camp, and draw rations for the company. A private had no way to distinguish himself. He had to keep in ranks, whether in a charge or a retreat. But now, as the generals and colonels fill all the positions of honor and reward, the less I say, the better. That concludes the 7th part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe for more episodes and leave a comment.